As we begin Chapter 7, the first lesson we're going to look at is finding square roots. This should all just be a review for you, as you guys have done square roots before, but we're going to be taking it a little bit of a couple steps further than just simply finding a square root. So there will be some new things added in here, but nothing you shouldn't be able to pick up on fairly quickly. So before we jump in and start doing some problems, we're going to look at some definitions first of all. All right, the first one right here is called a perfect square. Okay, these are the ones that you guys are used to. A perfect square is a number with integers as its square roots. So you take the square root of 64, you get a perfect 8. That would be a perfect square. The square root of 100 is 10. That would be a perfect square. If you take the square root of, say, 13, that's going to give you a decimal. That would not be a perfect square. Okay, so anything that comes out as an integer or a whole number, that's going to be a perfect square. Now, the second one we're going to look at is called a radical sign. And a radical is just another name for a square root. Okay, so anytime you see this symbol, the square root symbol, you could also call that a radical. Okay, so we'll kind of interchange it, see it both ways, especially as you get up into your Algebra 2 classes. It's going to be called a radical instead of a square root. Okay, now moving on to some examples. Okay, before we jump in, the square root of a number has two answers unless stated otherwise, and you're going to see why here in just a second. Okay, two answers. You're used to just seeing them have one answer, and it'll make sense more as we get into it. So the first one, the square root of 16. Okay, you're trying to figure out what number times itself would give you 16, and the first one that automatically should come to mind is 4. So that's one of your answers, but there is another number that when you multiply it by itself, you would also get 16, and that is a negative 4, because negative 4 times negative 4 gives you a positive 16. Okay, so that shows you right there that the square root of 16 has two answers. Okay, so example number 2, finding the square root of 25. Again, it's going to have two answers, 5 or a negative 5. Either one of those would work. Okay, now on number 3, you'll notice something a little bit different. First of all, this square root should go all the way across here on all of these. But notice this square root on number 3 has a negative out in front of it. That means your answer is going to be negative. Okay, now whenever we have a fraction, square root of 9 over 16, you're actually taking the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. Okay, so the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 16 is 4. And then this is only negative because of the negative out in front. All right, on number 4, we have a different kind of symbol that shows up. And you have a plus and a minus sign underneath that. That's called plus or minus, and that's automatically going to go into your answer. That just means that the answer could be positive or negative. So with these up above, we could have said plus or minus 4, plus or minus 5, meaning it could be positive or negative. And then if you take the square root of 2.25, you get 0.15. I apologize, I was thinking that was 0.225, but this should be plus or minus 1.5. I apologize for that. Okay, so if it's got a negative sign on the outside, that automatically means your answer is going to be negative. If it's the plus or minus symbol, you can carry that through into your answer as well. Now, the other part of this is going to be solving problems or evaluating expressions with square roots built into them. So, for example, number 1, we have 5 square root of 36 plus 7. Okay, you always do the square root symbol first. So, right here we have 5 times the square root of 36 is 6, and then plus 7. And you just follow your order of operations, PEMDAS. So, we multiply before we add, so 5 times 6 is 30, plus 7, your answer would be 37. Okay. On number 2, we have 1/4, I'm just going to carry that down, plus the square root of 18 divided by 2. Now, 18 divided by 2 is 9. So really, I'm just taking the square root of 9, which is 3. And then 1/4 plus 3 would be 3 and 1/4. Okay. On number 3, it says the square root of 81 squared minus 5. So what I want you to notice in this piece right here is you have the square root of something and then you're squaring it. Those are exact opposites of each other. Just like adding and subtracting are opposites, multiplying and dividing are opposites, taking the square root of something and then squaring it are opposites. So these basically cancel each other out. Because if you think about it, the square root of 81 is 9. And then when you do 9 squared, you get 81 back. So those two basically cancel each other out. So we're left with 81 minus 5, which is 76. And that would be your answer for that one. All right, now for your assignment, make sure you look back at the Canvas page for today for what your assignment is, as well as the ones that you need to do on the worksheet.